to Hockey Jersey Podcast.
Yay!
Woo!
All right.
And with the dad. Woo!
Hey,
Yeah.
thank you.
And today we'll be talking about one special team, the New York Rangers.
That's right. Now, the reason why I like the Rangers is because I got into hockey before the Sharks were in existence. Sharks came in existence in the 91-92 season, and that was when I was in 7th grade, but I started liking hockey a couple of years earlier, and I always liked New York City. I always thought it was a special place. I visited there a few times, so I picked the New York Rangers as my favorite team.
Okay. And so we have many different jerseys to share with you. So let's get right into this first jersey.
Well, this jersey is my favorite Rangers jersey. It's an authentic jersey. Back in the mid 1990s, mid to late 90s, Starter was the company that made jerseys for the NHL, and they were actually nylon, if you can feel the material, mesh nylon, but everything is sewn. The stripes were sewn, and then the Rangers were the first team to go back to this lace-up neck. This was common in the 50s and 60s, and then in the 70s and 80s, they started getting rid of the lace-up. And then the New York Rangers in the late 90s, mid to late 90s, started with the lace-up, and I thought it was so cool. It was a throwback, and now a lot of teams have the lace-up, including actually the Sharks have the lace-up now in their modern jerseys, right?
Here's the lace-up.
And you've got the lace-up too. So these are the Sharks. These are the Rangers. These are similar to the Rangers' current jerseys, the same pattern. And as you can see, we'll compare the stripes. Originally, the Rangers did not have any space between the white and the red, and then the red and the white. And for a while in the 1980s and early 90s, the Rangers striping pattern was a little different. They had a stripe of blue in between the red and the white on both sides. So a little different there.
Mine does not, if you're curious.
Yeah, so yours is like the current one, which is actually a nod to the original Rangers jerseys, but for a while they had it a little different. And then, shall we talk about the players?
Okay, let's talk about the players.
So here, I'll show you. First of all, my jersey is number 2, and can you see that on the screen?
And it's Leachy.
No, Leach.
Leach.
Brian Leach.
Yeah.
Who is, you got to know who Brian Leach is.
I do.
One of the most famous players in Rangers history, one of the most famous players drafted by the Rangers, and he's in the Hall of Fame. American-born player, grew up in Connecticut, and played for the Rangers for most of his career. He was an offensive-minded defenseman, and he scored a lot of critical goals. He was the Conn Smythe Trophy winner when the Rangers won the Stanley Cup in 1994, ending 54 years of a Stanley Cup drought. And in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final, I'll never forget, he scored that first goal. The Rangers had a 3-1 lead in the series. They had just come off an incredible series against the New Jersey Devils, and they won that in 7 games in double overtime. Then they had a 3-1 lead against the Vancouver Canucks, and they kept. I remember I think it was either Game 3 or Game 4 in Vancouver, when Pavel Bure for the Vancouver Canucks was a star. They called him the Russian Rocket. He was a star player, and he had a breakaway, and Brian Leach brought him down from behind, had no other choice, and they called a penalty shot. And then they would give him Pavel Bure a penalty shot, and then Mike Richter, the other American star of the Rangers, the goaltender, stopped it. And that was just such an exciting moment. And but then the Rangers, they let their foot off the gas. They lost Games 5 and Game 6, and then it was really really tough in Game 7. They had so many years where it looked like the Rangers could win the cup, and they kept losing, almost like kind of the Red Sox in their curse there. And in the first period in Game 7 at Madison Square Garden, which was super loud, Brian Leach started the scoring. He had this amazing goal, and Rangers ended up winning the Stanley Cup. And with it, Brian Leach became the first non-Canadian to win the Conn Smythe Trophy as the most valuable player in the playoffs. Back then, he was an assistant captain. And Mark Messier, of course, was famous as the captain. And then when Mark Messier left the Rangers, even though the Rangers had Wayne Gretzky, they decided to name Brian Leetch as the captain. So I wore this jersey a lot of times when I was in college. It was those years the Rangers were not very good, and I went to college in Vermont, near Montreal, and the Canadiens weren't very good either, 2 original 6 teams. But anytime the Rangers were in town in Montreal, I would go up there and watch the Rangers play the Canadiens, and I would wear this jersey.
That's very interesting facts.
So your jersey that you got there is kind of the modern style, and turn around, and you have Ryan Callahan, who was captain of the Rangers about 7 or 8 years ago, and led them to the conference final, where actually they lost to the New Jersey Devils, and then Callahan got traded to the Tampa Bay Lightning. So shall we see another Rangers jersey?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Hi and welcome. So back to this Rangers jersey podcast. Here we go. So here's the next jersey.
So this one is, as you can see, this was the style that the Rangers had that I was talking about, that they had in the 1980s and early 90s, and the style that they wore when they won the Stanley Cup in 94. And you can see the striping pattern. Hold your striping pattern up here so we can compare. In the 80s, the Rangers had this extra blue stripe here. Now, the original was similar to what you have, where they kind of squished the stripes together, and the blue in between wasn't there. And then they went back to the original striping pattern in the late 90s. So this style is what, when I became a Rangers fan, this was the style that the Rangers wore. And as you can see, take a look at this patch. What is it? What does it say?
It's a Stanley Cup champions, 1994.
Championship. So this is what they wore during the Cup final, right?
Yeah.
So the NHL started in the late 80s. I believe starting in 1989, every time a team would make it to the Stanley Cup final, both teams would wear a patch showing that they were in the final. Now all the sports pretty much do that. And so this was in 1994. And the Rangers, normally the patch would be here, but since the Rangers crest has the Rangers diagonally, they had to move it to the shoulder. And this jersey is Mark Messier, the most legendary Rangers of all time. Who did Mark Messier play for before he played for the Rangers?
He played for the Oilers?
Yes, he played for the Edmonton Oilers with Wayne Gretzky, and he won 5 Stanley Cups, 4 of them with Gretzky, and then he captained a 5th team to the Cup without Gretzky. And the Rangers were good. I remember they were good when I first became a fan in 5th, 6th grade, and then when I was in 7th grade, the 91-92 season, the Rangers were really good. They had Brian Leetch, they had Mike Gartner, they had a lot of great players, Mike Richter, but at the very beginning in the fall, just a few games into the season, they traded for Mark Messier, a future Hall of Famer, second all-time in scoring, I believe, and the ultimate captain. And when they got Mark Messier, they really had a mission to win the Cup. They won the President's Trophy in 91-92, but they were bounced in the playoffs in the second round by the Pittsburgh Penguins. The next year, they missed the playoffs. And I remember I made a chart. I had a chalkboard in my room, and I had made a chart of how many wins and how many points they needed in order to make it to the playoffs. And every time they win, I'd check it off, and they just couldn't do it. So they were eliminated from the playoffs. But then the next year, 93-94, they won the President's Trophy again, and that time they won the Stanley Cup. And Mark Messier was wearing this jersey in the most famous maybe game of his career, the most famous playoff game. One of the most famous playoff games in the Rangers' history. Do you know what game that was?
That was Game 7?
It was Game 6 of the Eastern Conference Final against the Devils. They were down 3-2. It was not looking good. They had to play Game 6 at New Jersey. And Mark Messier famously said, "We will win tonight." That was the headlines. He guaranteed the win, similar to what Joe Namath did with Super Bowl III. And then the Rangers went down 2-0. And I had friends calling me saying it's over. The Rangers are not going to win. They're going to be eliminated. And then they made it 2-1. And then Mark Messier scored the next 3 goals, and he got a hat trick. And the Rangers ended up winning 4-2 to force Game 7 back at Madison Square Garden. So a lot of people think Mark Messier was the greatest captain of all time.
So that's a natural hat trick. That means you got 3 goals in a
row. Yeah, and the third goal, the last goal, was an empty netter. So the Devils were threatening to try and tie it up, and he was able to take the puck down and fire in that empty netter. And the announcer for ESPN back then for hockey, his name was Gary Thorne. And when Mark Messier grabbed that puck and shot it in that open net, Gary Thorne famously said, "Do you believe it? Do you believe it?" Because Mark Messier, he said Mark Messier made the guaranteed to win, and he made it happen. And that was just amazing. Rangers would not have won the cup without that.
Should we go on to the next jersey? Okay, and we're back. So we can see, so this is the next jersey. And what is unique about this jersey?
Well, this is their white jersey. It's currently the Rangers road jersey, but they used to wear white at home. So when the Rangers won in '94, this was similar style, but they didn't have the lace up on their white jerseys until just a few years ago. But they added that, and you notice I also have a Stanley Cup patch on this one as well. What year is that Stanley Cup?
2014.
2014. So the Rangers won the Stanley Cup in '94, and I was so excited. I don't think I've ever loved a sports team more than I love the '94 Rangers. And the next time the Rangers made it to the Stanley Cup final was 2014. Mm-hmm. And they played the LA Kings, and I actually went down to Los Angeles to watch them in Game 2. And it was a lot of fun because I was sitting with some other Rangers players, and we were talking about the '94 season. We're talking about all these different key games in the playoffs in the '94 season, and went to double overtime. It was one of the most exciting games I'd ever been to. Back and forth every single time. There'd be a shot, there'd be a save, or hit the post, and back and forth. Unfortunately, the Rangers ended up losing, and they ended up losing the Stanley Cup final in 5 games that year. But they pushed 3 of those games, went into overtime, and they really pushed the Kings hard that year. And it was just really exciting that was the first time I'd ever been to the Stanley Cup final. It was very exciting to be there.
Yeah, I would love to be there. That would be cool.
Well, and you went to a Stanley Cup final a few years later with the Sharks, but we'll talk about that another time.
Yeah.
So you can ask me who the player is?
Okay. Who is this player?
So, I guess we'll stand up here. And who is it, Jonah?
It is Lundqvist.
Lundqvist. What position does Lundqvist play?
He plays goaltender.
Goaltender.
He's a great goaltender.
One of the greatest of all times from Sweden. And one thing Mike Richter has over Lundqvist, at least so far, is Richter did win the Stanley Cup with the Rangers, and Lundqvist hasn't won a cup yet. He's at the tail end of his career, but certainly whenever you have a key goaltender, you're always a contender in hockey. And so Lundqvist, one of the greatest players in New York Rangers history, unfortunately didn't always have a great team around him, but he did carry the Rangers really far and made it really close in 2014.
Yeah, too bad.
Yeah.
So cool about, so just one final look. Okay, should we go on to the next jersey? Okay. And on to the next jersey. So tell us about this jersey.
This is an alternate jersey that came out a few years ago.
That's the
85th anniversary, so it was probably about 5 or 6 years ago. And again, they had the lace-up, kind of the cool throwback. They darkened the blue a little bit. As you can see, if you compare it to your dark, it's a darker blue, more of a navy blue, where the home jersey is more of a royal.
Yeah.
And the Rangers jersey actually from the 80s was kind of darker. It was maybe not quite this dark, but darker than the current jersey. And then for a few years in the late 70s and early 80s, the Rangers dark jerseys said New York diagonally. So it's kind of a nod to that, the name of the city instead of the Rangers. Although the more classic Rangers jersey always says Rangers in a diagonal fashion. And even though he didn't wear it as a player, he has worn it as an executive with the Rangers. I'll show you.
Graves?
Adam Graves. who was also on the 1994 Stanley Cup final team and had won a cup with the Oilers in 1990, and he's one of many players to also win a cup with the Rangers after winning at least one cup with the Oilers. And Adam Graves actually played for the Sharks at the end of his career, and just a great player. One of the members of the '94 team to have his number retired at the Garden. So Mark Messier, Adam Graves, Brian Leetch, and Mike Richter, all those four were four players from the '94 team to have their numbers retired. And there was another number 9 for the Rangers, a legendary, Andy Bathgate, who has his number retired, but Adam Graves wore number 9 before Andy Bathgate's number is retired. So the Rangers actually now have 2 retired number 9s in the rafters.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it has a lace up, as you can tell.
I love the lace up. Yeah, I really love that. And of course, do you want to tell everyone what the A stands for?
Alternate captain. So you can have 2 or 3 alternate captains.
You have 2
2 alternate captains and 1 captain.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
That's right.
Should we go on to the next jersey?
Okay.
Okay, on to our next jersey. So tell me about this jersey.
Well, this is a fan favorite. You know, usually a Rangers jersey should have Rangers diagonally down the side, but this was a different story. And this was in the late 1990s. It was really, really popular for teams to start having alternate jerseys. Like it's so common now, but it wasn't common back then. And this is what the Rangers came up with to celebrate New York and the heritage. They had these Lady Liberty jerseys with NYR, New York Rangers, standing for New York Rangers on the bottom. Now, I think, actually, I don't know if you know this, Jonah, but I think I invented this jersey.
Huh?
I think so, because I remember when I was in like 6th grade, I remember writing a letter to the New York Rangers, and I told them they should have a Statue of Liberty logo. And I envisioned like the whole statue, but I think I came up with the NYR for New York Rangers. And I was thinking of it as being like a shoulder patch, because the Rangers don't have the shoulder logos. A lot of teams do. They have an alternate logo on the shoulder. So I remember writing a letter to the Rangers in 6th grade, and maybe it wasn't an original idea. Maybe a lot of other people had the same idea, right? But this is what the Rangers came up with, and you can see the shoulder patch is kind of like the typical Rangers logo, except it was a little different. You can see how it's kind of almost like a little kind of askew a little bit. But this was the idea, and this was a really popular jersey. And when I mentioned that I used to go when I was in college in Vermont and to see the Rangers, I used to go up there to Montreal, which was near Vermont, to see the Rangers play. And I'd either wear that Brian Leetch jersey that I wore earlier, or I'd wear this one. And show the player here.
Let's see.
Can you see it on the screen?
Tikkanen. Yeah, you can see it on the
screen. Esa Tikkanen. Great player. He was one of my favorite players on the '94 team, the team that won the Stanley Cup. He was known as the Pest. He would bother other players. He'd get under their skin, and but he could also score when he needed to. And he was a player that just the type of player you needed on the team if you're going to go far in the playoffs, because he would just really get under the skin of his opponents. And I loved Esa Tikkanen. And then he left the Rangers and he came back. And actually, the Rangers temporarily had their training camp. They were remodeling their training camp facility. They temporarily, for a couple of years, had it in Vermont, the University of Vermont. And I wore this jersey to go watch the Rangers practice. And I saw Esa Tikkanen, and he saw my jersey, and he waved to me. And that was pretty exciting. So a few years later, the Rangers did a white jersey version of this, and then they did away with them. And you can still use these jerseys in NHL 20 on PS4.
Yeah.
Or Xbox. And a lot of fans are hoping that the Rangers will bring back this alternate. What do you think? Do you like this one?
I love this one.
Yeah.
I like how the Statue of Liberty is NRY.
And it's kind of the Rangers. See, this kind of the Rangers logo there, the shape of their logo, right?
Oh, yeah. I
Yeah.
noticed that.
Yeah.
Okay. On to the next jersey.
On to the next one.
And we are back with our next jersey.
Well, this is the last jersey we're going to show. Actually, there are 2 more jerseys that I have, Rangers jerseys, that I'm not showing here. One of them was kind of the original Rangers jersey that I had in 6th grade, and that's in the back of my closet someplace. Doesn't fit me anymore, but I kept it. I used to wear that to school every day. And then I also had I also have a Mike Richter signed jersey on the walls, framed on the wall, right? So didn't want to pull that out.
Yeah.
But this is a Rangers sweater. There was a company that made sweaters that were meant to look like old-time hockey jerseys called Rogers Edwards. And, you know, because the original jerseys were actually sweaters because they were playing on the ice. And that's why a lot of times people refer to hockey jerseys as hockey sweaters. So if you're a true hockey fan, you know, you refer to them as sweaters and you know you're a real hockey fan. So as you can see, it's very similar to the current Rangers, right? The striping pattern, show the sleeve, is the same, right? White and then red and then white. No blue space in between. The white stripes are a little darker because they're a little older, but it has the feel of kind of a sweater as opposed to a jersey.
Okay.
Now we're gonna have one special bonus here at the end. It's not gonna be a jersey, right?
No players on the back?
No, this is just a blank one. No players on the back here. And of course, back then they would have numbers on the back, but no names, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So would you do one special bonus here?
One special bonus.
Bonus coming up.
Be right back.
All right.
Back. We're back.
We're back for the bonus here. It's not a jersey, but this was one of my favorite pieces of Rangers clothing. I love this jacket. When I was a kid, when I was about your age, Jonah, maybe a little bit older, these were called starter jackets. Starter was a company in Connecticut that would make these satin jackets, and the pattern typically would either have the logo on the side or it would be written, the team would be written, and then the league logo would be on the side. You can see that's the older NHL logo. The modern one, instead of black and orange, is black and silver, and then the NHL goes the other way currently. So, and then the red on the inside, just a very nice warm jacket. And of course, this doesn't fit me anymore. This is a men's medium. I would be at least an extra large now, but why don't you see if you can try it on here. It's a little big for you now.
It's a little big for me.
But when you go to middle school, which is the same middle school I went to, and the same middle school where I wore this jacket, you can wear that jacket there. What do you think?
Yeah, because if you're curious, I'm a youth large, so I have 2 more sizes to
probably a couple more sizes to make it, but I think that we can leave it on for the rest of the day. And when I was at middle school, of course, I went to middle school in California, so there weren't too many New York Rangers fans. I didn't know any other New York Rangers fan. But when I went to middle school, sometimes I would have an outfit where I would have Rangers sweatpants.
Whoa.
I would have a Rangers turtleneck. I would have a Rangers t-shirt. Sometimes I'd have the Rangers jersey over that. I'd have this jacket, and I'd have a Rangers hat. So everything but the shoes. So I got my point across, yeah. So what do you think? Was this a good one?
I think this is a great one. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed. So please leave a like and subscribe for more videos like this. And goodbye.
Thank you.